Julia,
I
you're
think you're
muted.
muted. Yeah.
I said, welcome back, Christy and Merritt. I know you've just been traveling. So here we go. Let's talk about children's mental health.
Well, first of all, we're stuck in Washington still because of the weather. So if we have technical issues, we're on some spotty hotel Wi-Fi, okay? And Christy is going to share her screen and pull up our notes for our project here.
I got it up, Meredith.
Okay. All right. And so we're focusing on children and mental health, and we're focusing really on birth through
Grade 8, 10.
age 8 to 10 years old. So a little bit of the younger set there, school age children and below. And we found that ours has jived really well between access to education as well as mental health services for youth between ages birth to age 10. And so we've got a lot of different resources that we've put together for this. And we've listed out our interviews first, and then we have our resources as we go through, kind of spaced out throughout the paper that we've got. And so the way that we're going to do this is go through, we split it up. Our group split it up between who took certain age groups. And so right now, Mallory is our first up. She was the one who was doing our earliest set. So birth to right around age 3. And so I'm going to mute it and pass it off to Mallory, and then we'll keep going as our age ranges come up.
So I focused on finding information for ages birth to 3 for resources specifically for mental health. And so I did one interview with the director of Early Head Start and Head Start she does 5 counties, which consist of Ida, Cherokee, Plymouth, Sioux, and Lyon. And her name's Kendra, and she gave a good perspective on why we need more resources, specifically for mental health. So there are mental health agencies in the community that she said free resources. She didn't give specific agencies, but I think that she gives a good perspective on the barriers, because one of her quotes was, part of it is access and the other part is parents acknowledging it could be a mental health problem. So there's some denial, and a lot don't like that wording or labeling. And I'm also going to interview a Head Start teacher. She also has experience with Early Head Start, which is more for the age group that I looked at. And so I'm also going to address how she feels about those resources for mental health. And then an article that I found showed this kind of stigma to be true for parents not knowing like where to access resources for mental health. And she kind of compared it to receiving, going to the doctor for medical needs. There's just not that happening for mental health. And so these resources are like scattered. So you see them like throughout Sioux City, but then there's a lot of agencies that do a lot of different like things within their agency. So it's not specifically honed in on just mental health. And so I found this to be true when I was looking at resources in Iowa, is that a lot of the agencies just don't specify specifically mental health. And so one of these is a pediatric integrated health home. So they go into the home, but it's only for children who are diagnosed with a mental, behavioral, or emotional disorder. And so there's a lot of limitations within that. It needed to be on like Medicaid, so more for like, a lot of these resources are for lower income families. And so not everyone's needs are being met within the mental health realm. And there's also in Sioux City an agency so the one I work for just does those 5 different counties. And so in Sioux City, they are serving a lot of different counties, but they only served 192 infants and toddlers. And so I'm sure that there's a lot more families that need resources, but they focus in on lower income families. And then, the program I work for is also early Head Start, so they go into the home and do home visits and gather information, but it's not just mental health that they're gathering information on. It's more like giving them nutrition and educational resources. And then there's also a program called Healthy Families that specifically is for Sioux County. And they try to get the pregnant moms, and then they give them more resources on how to be healthy and nutritional needs. And that's all I have.
Great, thanks, Mallory. Jenny, you're up.
Okay, I focused on ages 8 to 10 for my part. I found a lot of information in the top there that I typed up, kind of really starting kind of a paper form there with some good statistics and reasons why it's important that kids in this age range are receiving mental health care, and especially in the school setting, why it's so important. I looked for different services and resources that are available to kids in this age range. There's obviously one of the first things I found was that there's numerous private mental health therapists in the area, and then the Boys and Girls Home, Siouxland Mental Health, Jackson Recovery Centers, the IHH workers, the Pierce Center for Autism in Sioux City, and then I also found some information about Project Aware in Sioux City, and I have an email out to the director of that program, who oversees that program in Sioux City, Shelley Lewis, waiting to hear back from her to get kind of more information about that. Their main goal really is to put focus on mental health care in the Sioux City school systems, working with training staff to help the kids in school, help kind of look for those different signs of kids who are needing mental health care, because we know that a lot of the younger kids are getting missed and needing this type of care. And then also they focus on 2 specialized training for all the school counselors in the school system. Another thing I looked into was the barriers for families and for kids who need these services. For that, I interviewed 2 parents, and there in our notes, I kind of wrote down some of the things that they had mentioned, and also a few of us too in this group, some of the things that we've mentioned ourselves that we know are barriers to getting these types of services. Of course, the long wait time for care. Another big one was just the lack of knowledge that, for parents, who's that person that helps them know where to even begin. The commute to places, insurance issues, costs, of course, different things with insurances, Medicaid, that type of thing. And then just my last piece, I kind of put a little bit of tidbits of information about the different, kind of a couple different things that policy-wise that have happened that are also deterring people from receiving services and hindering people from getting these services. And then at the bottom there, I just kind of started compiling a list of things that we can do to begin to combat this problem.
And so we kind of skipped over the middle part, because a lot of the early childhood through to to Jenny's age range really bleeds in together. But then what Christy and I were focusing on also was some of the some of the challenges between really sorting out a mental health issue versus an educational issue. So I'm going to let her speak to that for just a minute here while we wrap things up.
Component and how that. Sorry. Okay. There we go. Okay. Can you hear me okay?
You sound good.
Yeah, to turn yourself up a little bit there. And how it pertains, I'm sorry, mental health and how it pertains from birth to age 10, and how that looks in the school, different components of that. We've had opportunity in the environment that we're in to be able to interview very dynamic, world-leading people that are leading big initiatives with mental health in young children, early childhood education, with early Head Start, and regular education going from career or cradle to career. We've also taken a look at licensed social workers that work in the mental health area with children from grades 5 through 8 in schools. And I think our time is up, Julie, is it not? Are we good yet?
You've got 15 seconds.
Okay, goodbye. This is, look at the paper, and we even on the bottom, please take a look at this. Look at that cool form. Yeah, that's really good, isn't it? Thank you. That's it.
I'm excited about how some groups are using some of these tools, you know, and maybe you've used them before, or, you know, maybe you're just taking them for a test drive, but hopefully they're useful, at least to some degree. Okay, so we've got some feedback for this group. Finishing strong. One of the questions I had, and maybe this is kind of one of those, well, of course we all know this, but still, have you talked, was part of this, and I might have missed it, what are the outcomes when kids and their families these ages don't get help?
Not good.
Yeah. So I think that's going to, you know, that's going to want to be part of some of this. It's like, what outcomes are we trying to avoid, right?
And that would be placement.
Sorry, Billy.
That would be, never mind.
It's hard to do this in one room with the
Our
feedback.
apologies. We just, sorry.
It's okay. We're all doing the best we can. Anyway, that might be something that you want to include as well. Okay.
And yes, and it is something that we are focusing on. We just kind of got crunched for time to put some of that stuff.
You bet. Okay, other folks. I don't want to hog the time.
Can you remind me what your initial question was, or what you guys are focusing on?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we'll have Christy scroll all the way up to the top there. And so what we're focused on is the difficulty in accessing mental health services and appropriate educational resources for kids aged birth through age 10. So we're really focusing on that younger school age set rather than the teenage mental health issues. And as we've looked into this more, our focus has shifted slightly. It's because it's so hard to parse out, is this an educational issue that they're lagging behind, or is this a mental health thing? We've really realized that the younger the child is, there's a lot more things that need to look into it to see if it's a developmental issue or a mental health issue or maybe a learning disability. Or maybe they just weren't in preschool and they're just starting behind their peers. So there's a lot of reasons why a kid may not be performing well in school setting, and it's not always just a mental health issue. So, but then it's like what Julia said about looking into some of those outcomes as well, about why is it important to parse these things out? What's the problem? If will they eventually catch up or not? So those are some of the outcomes that we're also looking at.
What is your geographical area? Is it all of Iowa, or are you looking at Sioux City alone?
We're looking at we've got some of the statistics we have are national statistics, because we're looking at things like early Head Start and some other stuff. it starts with a national number, and then we can funnel that down a little bit. But we're trying to focus more specifically on the northwest corner of Iowa.
Again, I'm still pretty unfamiliar with the younger population and mental health, but from some of the families I visited with, I know a lot of providers are hesitant to diagnose somebody that young with the mental health. Are you finding that to be an issue?
Yeah, because it is very hard to, especially for like a kid underage of like 6, let's say, for them to be diagnosed with a mental health issue unless it's something very severe. I mean, it can be done, but like you said, there's a lot of hesitancy there, and that's where this unraveling comes in, about, you know, what exactly is going on, you know, and getting some of those resources in. Do you want to? Christy says there's a lot more diagnostics than I think at that young age. And she says that it's often misdiagnosed. Sorry, I'm just translating for her so we don't get that feedback again, okay? Because that was annoying. But that's really what Christy does, in her work through the AEA too, is helping people navigate exactly what you're talking about, Christy. Christy Fravel. She helps identify those diagnostic tools that would be helpful for those real young kids. Any other questions from anyone?
Yes, I have a question. So you guys kind of talked about how sometimes it seems like there's a lot of resources for low-income families, especially, you know, at that early Head Start age. Have you guys noticed how other, you know, income level families access this? Is it through their primary care physicians that they're getting referrals to mental health providers, or how are they accessing those services or funding all of that stuff?
Kimber, are you talking specific about mental health services or early childhood, like preschool?
Probably the mental health services.
Okay. Yeah, that's mostly going to be through their primary care physicians. Like, it'd be like if they're in school or a daycare setting and they're seeing a lot of behavior that's not normal to what their peers are acting like, you know, different red flags or other behaviors that might be coming up, then they would be referred to their pediatrician, who could then help connect them with some other services. But a lot of that would be through private insurance if they're not on like Medicaid or some other stuff like that. Oh, yes. Yep. Yeah. Did you guys hear that or not? Christy was saying it was like another big catch for those things, or those well child visits that we all bring our little ones to, where they check on those developmental milestones and whether they're reaching them or not. Anybody else?
Looks like Maddie has a question for you.
So, and I missed this. You talked a little bit about your key informants, but were any of those parents that have tried, were some of them? Okay, sorry. I just remember Mallory mentioning her director.
No, that's okay. We talked really fast because we had a lot of information. But yes, we interviewed a couple of parents to get their take on what their experience has been with their children.
Okay, so again, I want to point out, and you all are doing a great job, and this is like totally how this goes, this process. So you start oftentimes, actually you start from different places, but let's pretend, can you stop sharing your screen, Christy, for a second?
She's figuring out how to do it right now.
Hold on.
No worries.
Give her a second.
There we go. Okay, so oftentimes, now you have to forgive my really poor visual aids, right? So sometimes groups start with something this big, and then by the time they finish, they have this, right? And that's the focus for the work. Sometimes they start with something like this, and they find that they need actually to move it out to here to get the scope that they need to understand it, to be able to grab onto something. And so it's going to depend on what you're working on as to how that goes. And I want to show you, and I promise we're going to get to the group processing work you know what, first of all, let's clap for this last group. Really great work. You know, there was a lot of diversity in how you all presented your work, and I think everybody learned from all these different topics. The questions were good, the feedback was good, and what this tells me is that you're moving and you're thinking hard and you're working really hard on these projects. Your critical thinking is in high gear, and that's super